Hello and welcome. I'm Gauhar Raza and you are watching Eureka. In the history of humankind, the discovery of petroleum was a turning point. It was a turning point after which nothing remained the same. Today, we have Dr. M O Garg with us, who is Director of Indian Institute of Petroleum. Welcome to Eureka, Dr. Garg.
Thank you, Dr. Saab.
I would like to know, when did you start thinking about petroleum products as your career?
As my own personal career, I think that was when I joined Engineers India Limited in May 1976.
When did you join Indian Institute of Petroleum?
I joined IIP on 13 July 1998, having worked in EIL for 18 years. And then I worked for a multinational private sector for 4 years, known as, at that time it was called Technip KTI. In private sector, particularly in a multinational, I got the exposure of doing research projects as well as commercial projects for clients worldwide.
But you inherited a long legacy of high-level research in science and technology.
Absolutely.
In IIP. So how did you react to this? There is always a kind of inertia in an institute which has long history.
Look, I was fortunate because when I was in EIL, I had already interacted with IIP a lot.
Okay, so you knew about IIP?
Yeah. IIP was my second home. IIP was my second home. And almost every week I used to come to IIP because in EIL we did not have any laboratory facilities. We were an engineering company.
Right.
So all the technologies that I developed in EIL was along with IIP. So I knew the people very well. And when Dr. Mashelkar approached me in 98 to see whether I was interested to come to IIP, it was a tough decision. The only thing which actually pushed me to take that offer.
But this is the period when you come to IIP, Indian Institute of Petroleum, that a vigorous debate internationally is going on. Petroleum products are seen today, by that time, as very limited resource. And one was to shift to alternative energy sources, maybe nuclear technology, etc., etc. So this competition and this debate, did it affect you?
No, not really.
In shaping IIP?
No, in fact, actually, the real push by the government started with the biofuel policy in 2003, where people were thinking about blending ethanol or biodiesel with gasoline and diesel respectively. And before that, of course, there was not so much. There was actually a discussion in conferences and seminars, but there was no government policy from that perspective. Even the auto fuel policy, if you are aware of, which Dr. Mashelkar chaired, that also talked about reducing sulfur and benzene and so on and so forth in our petroleum products, ultimately creating an auto fuel policy based on which you get Euro 3 and Euro 4 equivalent fuels in the country today. But when I was shifting
and
from...
a lot of research has gone behind that.
Oh yeah. That. In fact, our institute has been...
A common person doesn't know that just reduction of a bit of sulfur in a product needs high-level, intense, long-term research.
Not only that, but a huge amount of investment. From 1996, when there was no specification on diesel, we had 1.2% sulfur, down to 50 ppm, what you get in Delhi today. There is a whole lot of research which is done, as well as about 50,000 crore worth of investment in our oil industry. An equivalent amount of investment in the automotive industry.
So do you feel proud that IIP was serving India and serving future of India?
I can just actually make one line statement that if IIP would not have been there today, the oil industry of the country would not have been that vibrant as it is today. I think there are very few research labs in the country and in the world who can be so proud of actually nurturing an industry and to bring it to that level. And we are still a very strong part of that industry. In fact, when we created in 1960, the oil industry was a small baby. There were
And
few
now today we can be proud of saying that we are the fourth largest oil industry in the world.
in the world, and being threatened to be the third largest the moment Paradeep refinery goes on stream end of this year. So we'll overtake Japan. So it's US, China, and India now in that order. And with 22 refineries today, processing
A
close to
large network of refineries.
huge,
Very
huge. In fact, there's not a single state which doesn't have a refinery today. And with 235 million tons of crude oil being processed, out of which 70 million tons of finished petroleum
And
products are
there's
exported.
no engineer in the country who is involved in petroleum product and has not been trained by Indian Institute of
Absolutely.
Petroleum.
In fact, when we created in 1960, in fact, Keshav Dutt Malviya ji, who is considered as the father of the oil industry of the nation, along with our great leader, the earlier Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru ji,
Right.
they had a great vision, and it's
Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, Dr. Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar
Yeah.
also contributed a lot to this.
Absolutely. In
area.
fact, he is of course our the greatest scientist I think India could ever bring in terms of creating these institutions. And when I look
What a
back,
vision.
what a vision! In fact, when I look back in 1960, when the country was so poor, and the oil industry was so small and being governed by what we call as the Seven Sisters.
And we were very convinced by the powers that India doesn't have any oil. India shouldn't go into oil
Absolutely,
refineries.
you got it. In fact, we did discover some oil way back in 1888-89 by the Britishers in Assam.
Right.
And that's why the city's name is Dig Boy, because Dig Boy, dig and boy.
But it was considered to be very poor quality, bad, very expensive.
Absolutely.
And it was Dr. S.S. Bhatnagar who finally showed it to the parliament of the country
Yeah.
that there is oil in India and we should go in for it.
Absolutely. And that was
It was very dramatic.
It
I
is
know
very
that's-
dramatic. In fact,
that
that
incident.
actually led to the birth of ONGC
Right.
and headquartered in Dehradun. And
But the political leadership itself, as you were mentioning, was very sensitive towards these things. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru led, in fact, creation of scientific and industrial
Yeah.
infrastructure in the country.
And at that time, to think that our oil industry is going to be the backbone of the economy is very, very creditable. And there were only 7 refineries, that too also owned by the 7 sisters like Exxon and Shell and Phillips, Caltex,
American
etc.
and Dutch.
And then Indira Gandhi ji, she nationalized them overnight. When it was nationalized, suddenly the entire technical support got snapped off. And the only institute at that time which could provide that support was our institute.
We'll come back to Indian Institute of Petroleum and its contribution. We have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back. Welcome back to Eureka. We have today Dr. M O Garg, who is Director of Indian Institute of Petroleum. Dr. Garg, we were discussing the petroleum scenario. Now, a scientist or a technologist who is involved in this kind of intense research, which not only has immediate effect on society, but also has an effect on future. And you have huge investment. Now, in this kind of situation, when you are put in, then how do you decide which steps are the right kind of steps?
Okay. The first and most important thing is to have technologies which are developed indigenously. A lot of people don't know that all these 22 refineries that we have in our country today, almost 90% of the technologies are imported. And some of them may not be state of the art. Okay. Some of them are actually.
What you are saying is, if we are importing, then the other country is likely to decide what technology they are going to give you, and it may not be the state of the art.
It may not be the state of the art. And generally, our
And
oil.
therefore, self-sufficiency and self-reliance is very important.
See, actually, any country today, if you take the example of US, for example, it's strong not because they have money, but because they have technology. And if India has to be a strong country, first of all, the energy sector is very important because that actually, is linked to your GDP. The higher energy you consume, the higher will be your GDP. Our energy consumption is one of the lowest in the world, and that has to grow. With the 1.3 billion people and with the standards of living going up, energy is going to become a very important driver. And it's not only crude oil. We need to actually look at natural gas. We need to look at another sources of energy and then integrate them together. I think what's important is that we cannot look at each of these energy sources individually. We need to look at solar, we need to look at wind, we need to look at nuclear, but it has to be done at the right perspective. I'll give you an example.
Because every segment of energy has intense impact on the other segment of energy.
Both synergistic as well as complementary.
Right.
And for a country like ours, we also need to look at what are the sources, where are we actually energy inefficient. As a country, you'll be surprised to know that we are not an energy efficient country. If you look at the total GDP dollars per million BTU that we consume per capita, we are very low as compared to Japan or even US. So the total energy that we consume to earn $1 GDP.
Consuming energy is very different concept from being energy efficient.
Energy efficiency I'm talking about.
Right.
And so there is a potential to save at least 20% energy that we consume to do the same job. Okay. And I took a conscious decision in IIP when I joined because I had my previous background in advanced control and pinch analysis, which is called process integration.
Right.
And we created a group in IIP to do that.
Which was done by your group for the first time in the country.
Yeah, and we have actually gone around the industry and improved their processes using thermodynamics principles, using
Right.
first and second law of thermodynamics. Not only that, in fact, there is a lot of wastage that is around which can be utilized. For example, people talk about ban of plastics and use of something else.
Right.
You'll be surprised to know that I am not a supporter of that.
Is it?
I am not a supporter of that.
That is really surprising.
Please see that right from the time when plastics were invented, they have replaced almost everything. Even the jute bags in which the cement was transported has been replaced by plastic. What is important is to be able to recycle this waste plastic to something useful. And we have developed a technology to convert waste plastic to either gasoline or diesel, which is Euro 4 quality. And we are trying to actually get Indian Railways interested. And my vision is Indian Railways consumes 2.8 million tons of diesel. Entire Indian Railways.
Right.
And 2.8 million tons of diesel can be produced by
one of the largest in the world. Indian Railway network.
They have electrified part
we are
of their
second probably now, but we were first a few years back. Now China has
overtaken. But they have electrified part of their locomotives, but still 2.8 million tons of diesel is consumed. That means if we can actually 3.5 million tons of waste plastic will produce 2.8 million tons of diesel. Every 1 ton produces about 850 liters of diesel. Imagine if we can convert the entire Indian Railways to run on diesel from waste plastic, which they can do. They have the reach of the country. They have the reach of the country. Not only that, the state road transport corporations, they have a lot of land and they can build these plants. And the driving force today is that all the bulk users of diesel, they don't get the subsidy that you get in the retail outlet.
Right.
So they have to pay 10 rupees per liter more, and that's almost 40% of their operating expense. Secondly, of course, the question that you asked, like there's $1 trillion investment already made in the oil industry, and slowly over a period of time when crude oil depletes and so on and so forth, at least in our lifetime and in our children's lifetime, we still have enough crude oil. Okay, I mean that's always a kind of a pessimistic outlook people have. And more crude oil will be discovered. We have, Mother Earth has enough, okay, both in terms of crude oil, natural gas, and so on and so forth.
Very optimistic.
It has to be there because do you know that the world consumes 86 million barrels per day of crude oil? Right. 86 million barrels per day. If you convert that into calorific value, there is no other source of energy that can equal that. And as a society, we are so petro addicted today that right from the time you get up in the morning till you sleep, or even while you're sleeping, you're using some kind of petroleum product in one way or the other. The toothbrush that you use is made of polypropylene.
And it has reached all nooks and corners of the world.
Absolutely. You see every city of the world, the kind of transport that you have.
Even villages.
Even
the
villages.
remote areas.
Absolutely. So, saying that once the crude oil finishes, yes, if suppose there is a depletion in crude oil, the first mode of transport which will get affected will be the air travel. Because
that is where the major consumption is.
Well, not major, high. About 5% of the total crude oil gets consumed in terms of air fuel. But remember, the Wright brothers invented the flying machine after crude oil was discovered. So this flying machine never saw any other source of fuel other than crude oil. Railways saw coal,
right.
Shipping saw wind power, but plane never saw anything other than crude oil.
Right.
So what we did in IIP was we developed a very cutting edge technology to convert Jatropha carcass oil to jet fuel, along with Pratt & Whitney Canada, which are the jet engine manufacturers. Just 2 weeks ago, we did a conference with Australians, and you'll be very happy to know that Air India has now, looked at it very seriously to see whether they can fly some test flights using our jet fuel. Now, here is a situation that if you actually replace even 10% of the jet fuel with a biojet fuel, then our airlines, which actually fly over Europe and Australia, they have to pay carbon tax. European Union, right from 1st July 2011, have been charging carbon tax on any flight which flies over European Union. So, if you blend 10%, they get 10% rebate.
See, we may not be paying the tax that you are talking about, but will it be as polluting as the normal fuel?
No. In fact, actually, biojet fuel is a much cleaner fuel. It has zero sulfur. So, basically, the air quality around airports will improve. Very busy airports like
But it will be based on carbon. So,
yeah.
Sulfur, yes, it will be reduced, but the carbon content emitted finally into the atmosphere will remain the same.
But the idea is that that carbon which is emitted came from the plants itself. So, it's actually carbon neutral. The carbon will go and grow the plants again. But if you take fossil fuel and burn that carbon,
then you are adding
to the environment. Yeah. So, if it is not carbon negative, at least it's carbon neutral.
Right.
And the airline industry all around the world have taken, have drawn a green aviation roadmap that by 2030 they'll replace 30% of the jet fuel with the biojet fuel. And
you are painting a very hopeful scenario. Now, scientists are working on these very, very difficult problems, and I'm hopeful that scientists are going to find solutions to these problems. But in India, today we are facing a problem where scientists and technologists are not being produced in sufficient numbers. The young ones are not coming to science in stream.
Yeah.
Does that disturb you?
Yes, it does. I don't think there is any dearth of numbers, but I think there is a dearth of quality. There is very little employable.
The best mind is not going to science. That's what you are saying?
There are three problems. I think there is a twin problem here, three-pronged problems. Number one is that the best of the minds which come out of our institutions, they prefer some greener pastures, which is of instant or very near future benefits. Like, for example, either going to IAS or finance or MBAs and things like that. Secondly, the oil industry is considered to be a sunset industry, something which is not so exciting. But I always say that whenever the sun sets, it rises again, right? And
good.
Right? So, and one thing is very clear that you can go without food for 3 days, but you cannot go without petroleum even for 1 day. Okay, you would have noticed that whenever there is a bandh in a city, people don't rush for food, but they go to fill up their cars.
Right.
So that's the necessity of this particular important resource. And I would suggest that actually we need good people to grow this industry, not only to grow this industry, but also to make it competitive, and so that we can export technologies. I'll give you an example, what we've done, and I think this might excite our viewers and particularly the young people who are watching us. Reliance, which is one of the largest industry in the private sector, they export all their gasoline to the US market, most of it. I mean, because of the subsidy and stuff like that, they are not able to market their petroleum products within the country. And one of their major clients is US. And US has reduced the benzene content of their gasoline down to less than 0.6%. We still have 1%.
Yes.
But they have reduced it down to 0.6 because basically they are a gasoline economy. And they were looking for a technology for this. And they were talking to multinationals. I think they were also working with a multinational. And they were not very happy, and maybe they said that maybe we should look at another option. So they came to us. And we worked hard on it. In fact, that is well within our expertise area. We are very strong in solvent extraction in an area. Right. We have world-class expertise, okay? And that's my PhD also on. And we worked hard and we proved how good we were. We gave a complete technology package. I almost created a mini EIL and IIP. I mean, we can go all the way from a test tube to designing a full plant. And we did that. And they compared it with this foreign technology. And this decision is taken by Mukesh Ambani and Hitel Meshwani level, because both are chemical engineers. And they decided to go with IIP. Imagine, this is so significant. And I think as CSI, we should be so proud of this, that this is the first indigenous technology Reliance will ever commercialize in their refinery amongst all the sites. First indigenous technology.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And the first of its kind in the world. This is the first plant that will come of its kind in the world. It's being set up at a cost of about 150 crores. And it will reduce the benzene not only from the gasoline, but also produce pure benzene.
Okay.
So it will
be extracted.
Yes, and it will produce pure benzene. That's what their idea was, right. That we don't want to only remove benzene, but we also want to valorize this benzene.
Right.
So we produce pure benzene, about 180,000 tons per annum, from which they'll make money.
You have been honored. You have got awards to your credit. Have you felt sufficiently satisfied as a scientist that you have contributed? Society has recognized.
I don't think I'll be ever satisfied. I think there's so much to do. There's so much to do.
On that note, let's sign off. But before that, I would like you to give some kind of message to the younger generation.
The only message I want to give to my youngsters is that please feel proud to be an Indian like I wear this.
Be proud of being Indian. Do science, hard work, and perseverance. This will lead you to excellence.
Absolutely.
We'll come back next week once again.